Hey everybody, welcome back to Andertons TV. I'm joined today by a legend of our industry. Bill Putnam here of Universal Audio, who's CEO of Universal Audio. And it's a family business that goes back right to the beginning of what we now consider as sort of modern music, I suppose, contemporary rock and pop music. So we're going to talk a little bit about Universal Audio from its origins as well, and but probably spend the second half of the interview talking more around how you've got into guitar products more recently and stuff. But Bill, welcome to Guildford.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'd love to walk in here and see all this.
So we've spent 5 minutes talking before, and I wish we'd filmed that, and I hope we can sort of capture some of that, because I think nowadays we just take for granted what modern music is and how it's produced, and studios and reverbs and all this kind of stuff as just like part of the framework of modern life. But you really don't have to go back that far, 70 or 80 years, to the time when your dad would have started his business, and like it's all new. But tell us a little bit about, and I know, the stories that your dad would have told you about, working as a sort of engineer and producer and stuff, and working in the music scene and tinkering with stuff. Tell me about some of the things he would have talked to you about.
Well, I would say that one of the things I got from my dad, and I'll talk about it in some specifics here in a second, was just the magic of this all. Like the fact that these things work and the things they do, the tone, and that we enjoy it as artists and as listeners, and where it's gone. You're right, we take a lot of this for granted, but when under the hood, there's just a beautiful amount of magic, and magic meets the art. So my dad, he was a person who just never felt there was any reason he wouldn't be able to do something. So he'd have a vision, he'd have a need, and he was a musician. He started as a boy playing piano and singing, and got into radio, and then radio drove him to get technical. And he just loved it, and he was fascinated by it, and it never, it was just a constant source of drive for him. And he always just wanted to do something more. Whatever he had is like, why isn't that possible? So after the war, he was in the Signal Corps because of his kind of technical background. Right. He studied engineering. But he got involved in some recording of Armed Forces Radio. And when he got out of the war, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to start recording studios. And it was a really interesting time for recording and music, because a lot of independent music popped up, a lot of independent labels, and a lot of independent recording studios. There were just a few kind of before that. So he started his studio. He was in Chicago, which was kind of right place, right time. Yeah. It was just such an amazing place for music. Of course, all the blues, and he recorded a lot of the stuff that ended up on Chess. He mastered a lot of the stuff that was on Chess. So Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker and Willie Dixon, and he'd tell me about that, It's
insane.
And the big bands, Duke Ellington, Stan Kenton, they'd all stop in Chicago on the way back and forth between the coasts. Yeah. And so he started a studio, and immediately was working with a lot of the A players. And he was innovative, so he was always, had a need, and then he'd always invent something to fit that need. So a lot of kind of firsts are attributed to him. And he was the first to do artificial reverb, which was in his second studio in Chicago, which was the top floor of the Chicago Opera Building. Yeah. And he used the bathroom as the first echo chamber, and he used the stairwell there. And it was on an album called Peg of My Heart by the Harmonicats. And if you listen to that, it's got kind of this otherworld, ethereal, thick reverb on it. It was definitely unnatural, but the album was a hit. And
you must explain, because I when you first told me that, I just meant what he made the first device, did he? But
yeah, so
explain, because it's way more simple than that, isn't it? In terms of the mechanics of it. So
well, it was really an echo chamber. So he used the bathroom as an echo chamber, where he just took a send, probably had to patch into his console that he made and designed and made, and put an echo send on there with some line amps that drove us. A cable that went to the bathroom, and he put a speaker in there and an amp and a mic, and picked that up and just mixed that back in, and printed right there.
I was saying as well, it's just that I've been to the there is one of those at Abbey Road as well, and if you ever get to do a tour of Abbey Road, I'm sure I think they do open it to the public. Got some great stories of basically that you know, John Lennon and Paul McCartney just using it to get high basically all the time. But it's the same thing. It's like a sort of it's like a maybe smaller than this room with sort of concrete pillars in it. And that's the idea. You just feed a signal in, it comes out of a little speaker, there's another microphone somewhere else in the room, and a dry signal goes in. The microphone picks up the reverbed sound, goes back to the desk, and that's what you record. And you just think, and now we all do it in a little thing like this. You know, it's insane.
And I think it's, I don't know, there's something special about remembering where all this came from, because I think with the you know, just the amazing amount of technology and all that we can do as artists, and how fast things are moving, especially these days, that I still believe that there's magic behind this all. And so to think back to the origins and, you know, what they did with what they had. He did the first vocal overdub. And it was, when he was recording, when he started his recording studio, it was all on wire. Tape hadn't been invented. That was like in '48, I think. And he was always trying to do vocal overdub, but there was just so much noise that you just couldn't record something and then record it back and play it onto another.
So what I don't even know what you mean by all on wire. What?
Oh, wire recorders. So instead of magnetic particles on tape that we're used to, or we actually don't use that much of it anymore. But
so I know what tape is, but what? So what?
Before that, it was literally magnetic wire on a roll. So the early recorders, the first recording, other than, you know, a mechanical recorder to a piece of wax, or a wax cylinder, the first magnetic-based recording devices were actually wire, and they were incredibly noisy. But that's what they were using, and it was so noisy you couldn't actually really do an overdub without the noise becoming overpowering.
So an overdub would have been the same. You would have played it back on one wire machine and overdubbed it whilst recording it onto a secondary wire machine or whatever. So all the noise from the first recording almost like doubled up on the second.
So, but when tape came out, he found that the noise characteristics of the magnetic tape were different than the wire. So he was able to record on one, play it back while the vocalist could sing the second part and record it onto the other machine. And it was a song, "Confess" by Patti Page. And a bit of history that I don't think is well known. My dad was best friends with Les Paul, and so I met Les early.
So between the two of them, they invented some stuff. Right?
Exactly. And I remember the first time Les was coming over to our house. My parents were really worried about the words I was going to hear coming out of Les's mouth. And they were like, there's some words you probably never heard. And it's like, no, I'd heard them, you know? And I remember, you know, Les had a radio show, Rhubarb Red. So my dad went around the neighborhood putting up big signs saying Rhubarb Red Reunion. So, I mean, he was really a character and someone who's really dear to my dad and myself. But they'd get together and they'd kind of argue with each other. It was who was the first to do a vocal overdub. And my dad would say, "Oh, Les, you were the first." And Les would say to my dad, No, Bill, you were the first." And so after my dad passed, I was at AES and ran into Les and asked him, "Well, you know, I remember you and my dad used to get together and argue about who was the first to do vocal overdub. Who was it?" And Les goes, "That's easy. It was me." And so he took the credit after. But I later found out, because Patti Page's nephew was like the family historian, and he sent me a letter typed out that Les sent to Patti Page saying, "Hey, you know, I know we were trying to figure out who did the first vocal overdub. I got to the bottom of it." And Les said, "You and Bill recorded it, I think, on New Year's Eve of 1947, and so they were in the studio New Year's Eve, and he said, Mary and I," this is Les's letter, "in I think April or later on in the year of the next did their How High the Moon and the vocal overdub, and they put it out first. So he said, you and Bill were the first to actually record it, but the label didn't put it out. Mary and I were the first to."
I've heard quite a few stories around you know, multiple engineers or two or three different engineers who all stumble across the same technique, but they've all done it completely independently, and it's not like they've plagiarized someone else's idea. It's just they've all kind of been on a similar wavelength at a similar time. So it almost doesn't really matter who did it first, because neither copied the other. They just both worked it out sort of roughly around the same time.
And I think they were very similar because they, they'd see a need, they'd have a vision. And to them, it wasn't like, I'm just going to achieve that, in service of that. And it's like, there wasn't like, ego, or it wasn't like, glory or anything that was really driving it. It was just, they wanted to accomplish something,
I mean, again, there's some lovely stories. Tell me about, again, if you're cool to do that, there's some cool stories about how your dad got funded, who helped him with the funding to start the proper Universal Audio sort of stuff. And I wonder, and again, I think, feel free to just completely mic drop some of the products that your dad is basically designed that obviously changed everything.
Well, I know a bit about the funding. I think he went at different times when he started in Chicago, then moved out to California and started studios in Hollywood, which were United Western on Sunset there. And I know a lot of the artists ended up investing, and he came out there at the behest of Frank Sinatra. And he recorded a lot of Sinatra. Sinatra wanted to record in Hollywood, so he started studios there. And in fact, that's how, like, a bit of, like, the reason I'm on this earth is my dad met my mom because she was Frank's assistant.
Right.
And they got together.
Amazing.
And
I hope he paid back Frank whatever he owed him. I imagine Frank was under pressure to probably pay that back to someone else as well.
I think you do pay him back when you owe him. So there was that, but I mentioned the song Peg of My Heart he did with Harmonicats. So my dad believed in this band and was trying to get them signed to a label, and no one would pick them up, this all harmonica band. And my dad actually said, well, you know what, I'm going to start a label to put out your single.
Cool.
And he did, and it was a hit. So that actually funded my dad's expansion into the electronics manufacturing and actually the eventual move out to California.
I must admit, and I don't know who told me, in the back of my mind, it was someone that works for Universal Audio, but it can't be. So, but I had always assumed there was some association with Universal Music and Universal Audio. But there's just a total coincidence that the two share the same name.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. So I'm pretty sure I've even said in UA videos before that there's some connection in the background. So I apologise for being mistaken for all these years, but it's good to clear that up. But come on then, sort of, mic drop a few of the products that wouldn't exist had it not been for what he came up with, what your dad came up with.
So he's attributed with the first modular console. So back then it was just kind of one big kind of glop of circuitry. So if something broke, you kind of had to take the whole console down and so on. But he built these modules that would slot in. So if a channel went down, you just swap it out, boom, and keep because it was all about keeping when you got artists in the studio, you got to keep it going.
Time is money.
So, and then the Echo Send I mentioned, that became obviously a staple on consoles. The 1176, which is a classic limiter. The 610, which it was a 610 console, which we use essentially those preamp circuits in a lot of what we do, both in hardware and software emulations. The Cooper Time Cube. So this was amazing. My dad was fascinated with reverb, and in fact he knew digital was coming. And he knew that we were going to be able to do things like we do now, like delays and reverb. We take it for granted. Yeah. But back then it was a real challenge, So he again, starting with the artificial echo chamber, he was always trying to have some easy way to add delay or reverb. So it's like, sound travels basically 1 foot in 1 millisecond. So if you mic something 10 feet away from your speaker, you're going to get a 10 millisecond delay.
Right.
And he said, why can't I use a garden hose and coil it up, 10 feet of garden hose, put a little transducer in one end and a little mic in the other end. But, you know, he did that, and guess what? It sounded like talking through a hose.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of tricks he had to go to do the impedance transformation from the transducer into the hose, and then to the microphone. And he had these little metal things. He'd read a paper from a physicist about how to terminate, you know, do acoustical terminations, and actually put some filtering in there. And it was actually little cavities with screws with tapered ends, and he had these little kind of resonators at the end, and he got it to sound good. And it was literally
through like a 10 feet of hose or
10 feet of hose. And then they added another 10 feet. So you had a switch. It was either 10 milliseconds delay or 20 milliseconds of delay. And that's the Cooper Time Cube. And
so all the early slapback stuff is kind of from essentially that type of technology.
Yeah. And we, you know, and then, you know, who'd have thought that how many years later we do a model, we do a plug-in that modeled the Cooper Time Cube, because we model that acoustic transformation, but also the amplifier, the line amp that was driving it, and the microphone, and you know, and then people would be using it in pedal form and in plugins. You know, years later.
You mentioned. I mean, I think that there probably are some more products, and I think it's fair to say that your dad was genuinely sort of legendary status with regards to you know, how he changed how people could record music. You mentioned towards the end though, and I don't know how old you were at the time, but he obviously, you know, as he was getting on in life, decided to sell to Harman. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that time? Was there a sense of loss for you that you were going, oh, I would have liked to have been involved, or what was that?
Well, there was, because kind of the rest of that story is my mom passed very young, and very surprisingly when I was 17, and it really just slammed my dad. Right. You know, they were really quite a pair, and so, you know, he kind of really it took that blow and really needed to get out of the business. So right. it was. A loss on several levels. Yeah. I didn't want to follow in his footsteps. In fact, like as a kid, it's like, yeah, I liked what he did. I learned electronics from my dad. But we built radios. We didn't build audio equipment. Right. So it really wasn't my world. And I'd been around music my whole life that it was such a big part of me, but I didn't realize how special it was to me. So that wasn't my path at that time. So I went to school and studied physics, and I was going to be a professor. Right. That's what my, you know, goal was, and that did change eventually, and I became passionate about music technology. But no, there wasn't. I didn't want to follow in his footsteps, and I don't think it would have worked. Like actually having going through like to run the company now, what I needed to know was all the stuff I learned starting it from zero. Right. Right. So every step of the way, I've had to learn the next thing. And I think that's how, you know, I can't see it have worked if I'd have dropped in as his son trying to run this company. I think it just organically happened in a much better fashion this way.
It's interesting. I mean, I was wondering what similarities, you know, my dad started Andertons in '64, you know, your dad was maybe 15 years before that or whatever. But I think I was fortunate that by the time I got involved with the business, my dad was almost done with it. So I kind of I had to learn a lot myself. And he just, although I think he was a guy, I had lots of guiding principles from him. You know, I think it was important I understood what a profitable business looked like versus an unprofitable one, things like that. But actually, he wasn't that interested in being sort of dictatorial about how it should be run. So it's you know, and I think you have to work stuff out for yourself. And I think that's where those succession, that sort of, you know, family succession type business become more difficult, which is where the dad wants it done a certain way, and the son wants it done a different way, and then there's tension, and it's difficult. But,
and pressure, I'm sure. I mean, I felt it. Is that something you experienced, kind of the pressure to
pressure not to mess it up.
Exactly.
Not necessarily pressure to make it perform in a certain way, but I didn't want to be the one that went, the guy that, he messed it up.
I know exactly what you mean. And so when we put out products, I just want to make, I think that's part of the drive. All of us at the company want to continue to make great products and take so much pride in it that we want to, honor the legacy.
I haven't even asked you what you play.
Guitar.
You did, right? I was going to say, because that's something you started when you were a kid.
No, much later. So,
Okay.
I was around music, so it was in my bones for sure. But again, it didn't seem like it was my path. And my brother is much more talented musically than I am, and I was really more on the technical side, and that's always been what's fascinated me, and still is. But kind of my own path after my mom passed, after my dad sold the company, I did. I was doing my physics degree. I actually dropped out.
Okay.
And then took some time and did some work, and that's where I started learning some digital design, digital signal processing, and then I dropped out of that too. And my friend introduced me to the Grateful Dead. and the
next 7 years is a complete blank.
How did you know? But what I do remember was getting inspired by music and the intersection of music and technology. Right. They, a lot of people know about the band and less know that they really pioneered a lot of really amazing things in live sound. They were all about their PA started with a real hi-fi perspective. They were the first to use delay towers for the rear speakers. A lot of firsts and a lot of technology came out of there. And so I saw some of that. I got to know some of the people who were doing the sound. And then I'm like, this connection between music, and now I'm really turned on by music. And I see what it can do to a culture and the impact it can make on lives. Even though I'd been around it the whole time, I had to rediscover it myself. And then I saw the connection with technology. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, that is exactly what I want to do. Yeah. And it's funny, I was, Dad, you got to listen to this album. And I played him I think it was one of the Live Dead albums, one of the more spacey, jazzy, open, kind of outside songs. And he goes, I knew they were good. What took you so long? So my dad appreciated it, and but then I was laser focused. Like I did my time. I mean, literally traveling around to all the shows, making money selling stickers in the parking lot, and making lifelong friends. And then I went back to school, finished my physics degree, went right into electrical engineering degree, did my master's, then went right to Stanford. And was doing a PhD in electrical engineering, finished all my courses, and then decided I needed to start a company. I thought it would take me a year to get the company solid. I could go back to school and finish, but here it is 25 years later and haven't gone back to school.
Well, so this is great. So this is the sort of the pivotal point. So your dad has sold to Harman. Harman, if you don't know, is a humongous multi-billion-dollar a year organization that acquired tons and tons of music brands as well as other brands, and then I think it was probably fair to say probably lost focus on those individual brands, and so a lot of those individual brands were folded up, and obviously you had the opportunity to buy yours back or restart it. In terms of the timeline, had your dad passed before you were able to buy it back? So he never got to see that.
He didn't get to see us restart. He passed in 89, and it was 97, 98 when we got the idea because I knew I wanted to do music technology, and it was like, okay, let's go see if we can restart my dad's company. Yeah. So he didn't see any of it, and I often wonder if, at the time when he passed, it was during those 7 years that are a blank that you mentioned. It was during that time, so I was out traveling on the road, and I think he was a little concerned, but. I think it's part of the pressure, right? Like we want to do the legacy proud. We want to, make great products, and we think, we push things along as well, So you didn't get to see any of that.
So look, I'm sure he would be immensely proud of the fact that you've continued his legacy of finding solutions for musicians to make music. Now, obviously, that was so I suppose your tenure as CEO of Universal, has seen a real digital transformation. Most of the products now are focused around harnessing digital in some way to solve challenges. We could, although I'm not the best, I would be the worst host to do this. We could talk about all of the interfaces and I suppose ultimately that was your first, that dominated the first few years of you doing Universal, which was looking at, the pure recording side of things, and been hugely successful. Everything you've ever heard in an Andertons video has been recorded using the Apollo interfaces that you made, and we tried lots of different interfaces, and they are the best sounding ones.
Thank you.
So the end. But as a guitar player, it first tweaked my interest, of course, when the aux came out, and you employed a wonderful human being called Tor, who we'd all known from his TC days, and obviously was very experienced in the guitar world and the pedal world. So, but why? What was the draw of the guitar world?
Well, we wanted to get closer to the music, right? As we expanded, and I don't know, probably 90% of us at UA are guitar players. We have quite a few, and so there's just a lot of pent up passion for it. And we're absolutely a group of passionate folks, and we love what we love. And God, there's just so much exciting stuff going on in guitar. But I didn't want to just get in and do something me too. We really only want to do things, it makes business sense, but it's really kind of, personally satisfying to be able to do something different and better. And I wasn't sure that we could in guitar. And so, and we have a lot of great ears at UA for recording equipment and recording and mastering, and that was really where we came from, and that was our pedigree. We didn't really have the same around guitar, so I first needed to see if I could find someone who really had that, and I also wanted to see if there were any problems that hadn't been solved sonically that were important to musicians that would help them express themselves better with digital tools. So you mentioned Tor, also James Santiago,
yes,
who you
indeed.
Probably know.
Yeah.
So I got introduced to him, went to his house, and I go, play me something with your amps. And he had a hallway filled with Marshall cabs and Marshalls and a bunch of stuff that play me something that happens with real amps that no one has ever captured digitally. And we started listening to it, and we got into this this speaker breakup, some of the natural compressions, so how the sound changes over time as you start to work the amp, and I could hear it. It was clear, and we went and used all the modeling stuff, and it was absent. I'm like, great, there's something here to solve.
Right. Yeah.
And so, in fact, so we took that on, and I saw there's something I thought we could do that would push it forward. And that would be meaningful, and so we went for it.
Do you know what you solved for me massively with the aux was option paralysis. It's like, I'm a guitar player. I like simple things. I've grown up playing an amplifier where the most complicated thing about the amplifier might be 6 or 8 knobs on the front of it. That's it. And we were using different alternative ways of trying to record guitars digitally, whether it was rack units or whatever. This idea, I was intrigued by this IR, sort of impulse response idea. And I'd had a few products, and it just seemed like there was 10,000. The rhetoric was, look, there's 10,000 different IRs. What more could you want? And I'd get past the first 5 and go, have I literally got to sit here for the next 3 days to try and find which one of those I like the best? So in the end, it didn't matter that it had 10,000 because I'd only try the first 5 and I just picked the one that I liked the best out of that. And then we went, what I loved about the aux, and the very first thing is someone says, oh no, you can't load your own IRs into this, it's all proprietary. So you're like, oh, I'm a bit worried about this. But then someone explains, it's like, but don't worry, we've just found the best speaker in the best room with the best microphone placement, and that's your 2x12 option. So if that's what you want, just use that one. So you do it, and you go, that sounds great. happy days. I use that one.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and now I can just get on with playing guitar, which is all I ever wanted to do in the first place.
Absolutely.
Rather than scroll through. And to be fair, you've continued that, theory or whatever you want, philosophy in all the guitar stuff. It's just, the focus is to get you playing as fast as possible with the best sound that you can get in the smallest amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, when you have that creative spark, the last thing you want to have to do is go read a manual or dig through a lot of menus and so on. But you mentioned the IRs, well, first of all, thank you for that. And that was exactly the intent is to get, the right thing and the best things and to find the right speaker and to put it in a good room and find the right microphone. But it goes beyond, like IRs only capture linear response. And so you can get part of it, but a lot of really the dynamics that you feel when you play and a lot of the sonics are from nonlinear behavior of speakers. And so IRs are never going to get you that. So when you look and you pull up a setting and of a cabinet and stuff on that, people, it feels like you're choosing an IR, but it's a lot more than that. We're actually modeling the nonlinear, and that gives it that's the playability and that's the dynamics you feel and hear. That's different.
Do you have a view? I mean, I know you haven't really. Do you have a view of the sort of the modeling versus profiling sort of argument of, and what I mean is modeling as per what the approach within, the Lion or something like that, versus how a Kemper or a similar device would take a Marshall and attempt to try and capture a sort of a snapshot. What's your sort of take on the pros and cons of those two approaches?
Well, I guess maybe I can just dodge the question slightly and say that for us, getting under the hood and really understanding what's going on unleashes a lot. And when we are trying to model something and we're not getting it right, and we find we need to dig harder and dig deeper and understand it, and then that ends up making a better product. So for us, getting in and really doing the detailed modeling is part of our recipe, right? So that works for us.
Well dodged. I suppose ultimately, again, I'm quite surprised. I think where technology companies get it wrong with guitarists, with some guitarists, I think it's the majority, but I probably shouldn't speak for all of us. I think there's a perception that giving the guitar player the tools to go and adjust 100 parameters of his or her guitar amplifier. You want to adjust tube sag and this bias and this. I don't think we do. I think we just want to plug into an amplifier and get a great guitar sound. And I suppose, so again, what I like about profiling is that sense of it. It's the sort of an instant fix of like, if I set the knobs there and I profile it and I plug into the digital the profile, that is the sound that I get. But what I do understand that modeling gives you greater control and a deeper understanding. But I think it's how you then utilize that in the user interface. Like you take care of the 1,000 different things that's going on within a guitar amplifier. I just want the 6 knobs on the front. And for it to sound like a guitar amplifier.
Well, I'm with you totally, and I think it goes beyond the guitar world. I think it goes in the recording world and so on. And I know my dad would want the technology to get out of the way. He wanted a knob he could grab because the music's happening out here when he's behind the glass, or the music's happening here. And I think is, even though I come from the technology side and I'm an engineer, it's not about technology at all. This is in service of something else. And as soon as you make it too complicated, you're really forgetting why our industry even exists. And it exists to create music that people can share with each other. And so that is what it's about. And I do think that there is almost this like badge of honor by learning something super freaking complicated, whether it's a piece of software or whatever. And then once you learn it, now it's like, I put all this time into it. I want everybody to put all this time into it, right? And so when you talk about making things simple And I think about it as just easy to use, get technology out of the way, get to the music. A lot of people say, oh, you're just dumbing it down. And I have a different opinion. I just think making something as usable as possible in service of the art is the right tact.
Yeah. So how many years has it been since the Aux now? Is that 5 years old or something?
Man, time sure got blurred during the pandemic, but it's got to be more than that. It's probably more like maybe 8 now.
Wow.
But yeah, it's hard. Yeah.
And you've worked with amazing people. I'm trying to remember, have we had James Santiago not in person, but did we Zoom with him once? No, we never did. I'm everything he seems to touch, I like. So how did you meet James and you know, what products has he been involved with over the years?
Well, every single guitar product and a bunch of non-guitar products too. So James is awesome, and so you should have him on and you should Zoom with him. And again, like I only wanted to go into guitar if I thought we could do a good job, and so that means finding the right people. Yeah. And I asked around and talked to some friends and got introduced to James. And I remember it was funny because he said, oh yeah, I was going down to LA, and he goes, yeah, I'm going to be sitting in with my wife's band tonight. You want to come by? And I figured it's like some bar band, some cover band or whatever. And he goes, yeah, we're at the Whiskey. And it was, you know, Dweezil, you know, it was Zappa Play Zappa.
Oh, okay.
And she's a horn player, and amazing and just awesome musician. So I went and saw that and saw him sit in, and the next day I went to his house. And that's why I said, I want to hear some stuff from real amps that no one's captured yet. And the thing is, he has just the most amazing ear. He can listen, tell what pickups you have, and so on.
What was his background before he worked with you then?
Just he's an awesome guitarist, and and he worked at other you know, guitar tech companies.
Okay.
And he'd worked in a similar space, but yeah, he's a pleasure to work with, and him and our chief scientist are just like, they are on the same wavelength. And that's part of what has to happen, is you have the person who's close to the gear, who has the ears, who's hearing the stuff, who can then get to the technical folks who also all have ears. You know, Dave's an amazing musician himself. He's and get that. If they can't speak the same language or find a way to communicate, then it isn't going to work. But those two are like right on the same way. Like he can say, hey, this is, I'm hearing this, and do you, and oh, I hear that. I think I know what that is. You know, and getting that relationship going. But he's just an awesome person to have on the team.
So, despite the fact that you didn't start playing when you were a kid, have you developed that terrible gas disease that we all have? I mean, it's the worst. Like, I guess really bad.
It's good.
Tell me, come on then. Let's geek out. How many Les Pauls have you got?
Well, okay, so I have 2 Les Pauls. Okay. I got an early gold top, and that was something I got and had this notion that, well, I got my son a Les Paul, and I bought this, and we were going to go out and visit Les, and we were going to have him sign it. Because he had come to our first, he'd come to our first when Universal Audio came out. He came to our opening and signed guitars for some of our employees, and I thought, no, I'm not going to ask him to sign a guitar, and I just always regretted that. So I said, well, let's take these guitars out to Les, and he called me up and he says, hey, you know, Billy, you know, hey, maybe this isn't a good week. And the next week, this isn't a good week. And then obviously he passed, you know. So I have 2 amazing Les Pauls. Every time I see that guitar, I think of him. My first guitar, though, I'm embarrassed to say my first guitar was a late 60s 335.
It's a tough guitar to start on.
I probably still don't deserve it. But, you know, I was in LA, I got everybody, you know, the way we bought guitars back then is we got the recycler, which is the paper with all the listings, and I found this, and it was more than I can afford, but I had all this cool gear that my dad had said I could trade for a guitar, so I had some Uri EQs and a compressor, and I asked this guy if he wanted to trade, and boom, you know, so, and that was my first guitar, and it's still one of my absolute faves.
Some of that, I mean, to be fair, it's probably a fair trade. Some of that vintage, you know, Uri stuff and UA's, it's probably not dissimilar money to a vintage guitar now.
I think I got the better of that deal with this guitar and how it's appreciated. But, you know, he was selling it for a few $100s back then, you know, and it's a beautiful tobacco sunburst and just sounds great.
And what about, because I'm always, you know, clearly, I'm sure you want to stand behind your products and we can, and look, we can talk about how great these are, and the lion video that we did. I think you can see there's a genuine reaction in that video of like, okay, there's nothing this here.
It does something.
But what did you have? Did you have a collection, or do you have have you got all the old pedals and amps and stuff like that? And are you sort of are you into that still?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a really amazing part of this, because of course we need the gear, right? So on the recording side, we've got a lot of really amazing pieces. Recently, we just bought a console that came up on Reverb, a console my dad put into Caesar's Palace for Frank Sinatra. And it was the live sound console, a little bit of a strange format, but we got this beautiful 60s pristine, everything works console. So we do have quite a collection of gear. In fact, we have more gear than places to keep it. So yeah, so gas is real.
What is where does this go? Because I'm sitting in a music shop here that sells guitar amps, tube amps and stuff like that, and then the modern digital alternative of it. And at the moment, the digital alternative are trying to recreate the old amplifiers. They're not trying to make things that sound different. They're trying to make things that sound the same. And commercially speaking, I don't know if winning is the right word, but they are gaining market share from the amps that preceded them. So you wind that forward and ultimately go, well, then the amps won't exist anymore because they'll all go bust, or they'll exist in a really kind of like maybe high-end hi-fi does now. It'll be like 2% of the market decides to go and spend $25,000 on a valve amplifier, and everyone else is using a MP3 player, type thing. And then what does it copy anymore? Because it's like everything's gone. I'm interested in. I think you can see in the recording world that is how it kind of played out. Reel-to-reel machines and all that kind of stuff, and big analog consoles are by and large not used anymore, and everybody uses something digital. But I'm sort of going, does that matter to you, or is it inevitable because nobody uses a typewriter anymore because we all use a laptop? Nobody sits and cries about the fact that typewriters don't exist anymore. I'm just
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, and I think in general we just try to listen to our customers and see what they want. I mean, I still I want to build myself a tube radio, so I'm still fascinated by the old. And we make analog. We hand build LA2A compressors as well as sell many versions of the plug-in. So I really do think there's a world where both matter. And I especially am interested, you mentioned the Apollos, where we have software built in that does really interesting things with the preamps, and you get, because we have both the hardware and software, you can do something that really wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And so, I don't think it goes away. We're going to continue to do our best to just get better and better at emulating, and it's getting, quite good now. I also think that there's a direction, like on the recording side, to do stuff that isn't possible in analog, and put more creative tools in front of the artist.
No, I still think at the moment it is an interesting one, isn't it? At what point? Yeah, it's everything, isn't it? Photography, how we listen to music, how we create films now. It's like there's no. It just moves forward, doesn't it?
And you haven't even mentioned AI yet, right? And what that's going to do to our universe. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about.
Right.
I mean, I'm not a huge expert in this. I certainly don't profess to have anything like the understanding that I'm sure you do. But it is. Fun enough. I was looking at almost like the next iteration of a Zoom phone call now with a Canadian company doing holographic. And you just sit there going like, it's the rate of what's the term, the rate of change.
The rate of change. Yeah, they're talking about the singularity.
It's like so what's normal now is
wait a week.
Yeah. It's insane, right? But so okay, so what do you what is? Are you sort of going to go, I've got this idea for a song, it kind of goes, na, 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 and then some Universal Audio box will go, here's your song.
Yeah, I mean, that's happening, right? So, but, so actually I've been thinking about it since the 90s when I was doing my master's, and I studied neural networks and pattern recognition, and then I continued this and even did some coding myself of doing, MIDI composition, things that spit out MIDI. I wanted a bass player that would be willing to play with me, when I was doing jazz. So I always wanted to make, that. And so I did some work on that. So I've been following that world for quite a while, and but was still surprised by how good it got so fast, and just in the last year and a half or so. And I got to say, though, my first reaction was once I realized that you could do the da-da-da-da-da, press a button, and you got a symphonic rendition of your song with, all this is like, I got a little depressed, right? Like, but then I realized that the thing that ends up mattering to our customers, to me, and I'm certain to you, is just the feeling we get when we create. And we create something. So it's the creative experience that I think is the ultimate product that we deliver. And as long as...
So we don't want to automate that creative... You still feel that inside what a human really wants to do is work it out and write the song.
Yeah, because anybody can press a button, and there's plenty of places where that is going to be useful. If you have a piece of video and you're focusing on your video and you just want a soundtrack that fits it, boom, that's a great application for that button.
Yeah.
But ultimately, our customers, there's all sorts of things that I love to do that there's so many other people in the universe that do a better job than me, or I can go to the store, like I'm into woodworking. I'm a noob, right?
Yeah.
Just getting started. I can buy better furniture than I can make, but making it has that experience, that creation, manifesting a vision. That's what it's about. So that will always be there, And so that I got hard, I got kind of like when I say that, I get kind of those good chills through me, like, yes, I feel it. That's true. And people will always want that. And so there will always be room for companies like us to put tools in their hand so they have that creative experience. Now, I also just have faith in artists, because artists and creatives, they're really kind of the antennas of the world, and they take in technology and they spit out art, and I think the same thing's going to happen with AI, even in ways we can't imagine. So I just have faith in artists, and I have faith that artists really are about expressing humanity, and that's not gonna go away. So
this clip is going to be played in 2053 when Skynet have taken over the world and Terminators exist, and you go, you were wrong.
You
Will.
were wrong.
It destroyed everything.
Turns out I'm wrong about a lot. So I'm wrong about this, but for the moment, it's given me some optimism, and
It's that rate of change, though, isn't it? It's just you go, you look at the 100,000 years it took humans to work out the first basic concept of farming, and then the next 3,000 years or whatever for the Industrial Revolution, or whatever it is, and then like you say, and then a week to get from here to curing cancer through AI. It's just lunatic. Well, look, wow, that got deep fast, didn't it? Let's talk about guitar pedals. I mean, I suppose we're not showing anything hyper new here.
You got Lion.
Lion, which was the pedal that I think was the last video that, I'm sure we've done maybe some of these compacts we did since Lion, but Lion was crazy. How did you feel about the press that you got when it came out that the Edge had decided to stop using his amps in the Sphere and was going to go over to using the Rubies and stuff?
I got to say that's one of the most satisfying things. Like, that's a good day. But not even just getting the press. Like, honestly, yes, you talked about you had respect for profitability when you started the company, and you got that from your father and so on. And a big part of my job is that, and I'm in the spreadsheets and doing the projections and so on. But that isn't the thing that gets me going inside. And the satisfaction of having, whether it's Edge or I'll be getting coffee at wherever, or someone stops me because I got a UAD, a Spark shirt on. Oh, I couldn't have made my last album without your plugins, or I couldn't have made this song, or this and that. It's like, what more could you want out of life than to have the satisfaction of being able to make something that someone that puts a smile on someone's face, that gets them motivated and so on. So honestly, I get a thrill when I get it from anybody, anywhere, that we've been able to have that kind of impact. But then when you have someone who's just so like awesome when it comes to sonics and just nails it and has a sound and is willing to take on what we've spent years and years on, it's just incredibly satisfying. I mean, and it really is the kind of the fuel that keeps us going.
I won't. Every single pedal that's on the table here, there will be a video that myself and Pete have done a deep dive on. Loosely speaking, you've got amp in a box pedals, you've got some of the bigger effects style pedals, and then you've got some more compact versions of those effects. And again, that they're all, every single one of these has to one degree or another left us kind of going, this is cool. Can we talk about, I mean, is there anything you want to talk about within there, or can we talk about maybe like what's next? I mean, I still kind of feel guitars is quite new for you, so it's just like there must be a ton of opportunity to sort of go where, you know, without giving any trade secrets away. I mean, where does the opportunity, you know, what excites you about, you know, things you haven't done yet?
Well, you know what it actually excites me when you're talking about the aux and talking about getting out of that option paralysis. And I'd say really as a company, learning to understand more about our customer, learning how they're making music, learning how they're recording music, learning how they're kind of going back and forth between the things, and really trying to like solve some of those problems and make it easier to capture the creativity. And I'm just personally excited by the fact that recording's awesome, and but it's also awesome to put gear in the hands of the person who's, you know, on the other side of the glass, and learning more about that customer, and, you know, making things that are hopefully easy to use and help them get to their, you know, manifest their creativity. So I mean, do you think we'll continue to see an expansion of this line of whether it's amp in a box or effects pedals, or do you, I don't know, are you thinking, hope so.
Yeah, or I mean, what about slightly more left field? You talked about the fact that you still make an old valve compressor alongside the digital or the plug-in version of it. Would you go, well, why don't we just make a valve amplifier then?
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing I do in my spare time. So I love that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's you know, the thing with the business is you can't just do all the stuff that I love, right? We have to do the kind of intersection of stuff we're passionate about, because you know what, you don't, unless you're passionate about it, you're not going to get that special something that really drives it forward and makes it great. So it has to be this intersection between the thing that's passion, you know, makes it, that we can put some passion behind, as well as something that's commercially viable. So, you know, I'm not here to announce a line of amps, but there's just a lot that interests us, and, you know, if it makes sense.
Your commercial team will be over the moon at how well you've dodged all my awkward questions. So nothing has been revealed whatsoever, despite me probing.
Know, it's against all my impulses. I just don't want to get up and tell you about the next thing and so on. But we do have a company to run, and but you know, we're just fascinated by we're all gearheads, right? And we want to do new things. We want to keep going, and for everything you've seen, we probably got 10 more ideas, right? So no shortage of ideas, and no shortage of, you know, algorithmic know-how, and there is hopefully a lot ahead of us.
Well, look, I would love to see, you know, new variants of the aux. I'd love to see versions of this where there's maybe a few of the same thing in one box. I'd love to see what you could do if you decided to bring a valve amp to the market, maybe incorporating all kinds of stuff here. But well, I can but dream about what might come.
That's awesome. I mean, I was going to say, hey, so let me turn it around. What would you see? So you said some of those things. Like if there's a new version of aux, what kind of things are you looking for that it doesn't do? Yeah.
I think the combination, I still, if I'm using one of these products, what I feel is missing from my experience is the 2x12 in the room. So you are emulating that, but ultimately I'm hearing it through whatever I'm hearing it through a pair of. So I'm always kind of going, anything that can make me forget that I'm hearing it through a set of speakers like this, when I want to hear it through a speaker like this is a good thing. I still kind of feel like I still say now, you know, if someone said, right, there's a gig tonight, my inclination would be to turn up with a Fender Deluxe combo and a couple of pedals in front of it. But I sort of then feel if the sound man's going to go, but I'm not micing you up, so there's, you know, da-da-da-da. I sort of want that, but maybe with an aux built in, maybe, you know, it doesn't need to, maybe simplify it even more so I haven't got to have an app type thing ever. I'm probably not representative of the generation of guitar players that have gone over to a MIDI board and are happy with all that kind of stuff. I'm very representative of someone that's just wants to plug in and experience that. But I am interested in achieving bigger sounds at lower volumes. I get that. I think that's a real, you know, that's a real dilemma. You know, that I totally get now that we aren't playing gigs where a Fender Bassman is appropriate anymore. But it's a great sound.
Yeah.
So how do you?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the. But I'm not interested in doing it with a product that has a manual like a Yellow Pages and has, you know, infinite menu.
Yeah.
For me personally.
That makes a lot of sense.
But I if I had to, you know, I'm moving house later this year, and I'm finally going to get my little music room / studio kind of that I've always dreamed about having. And right now, the gear I would want would be a valve amplifier and an aux and some pedals. So I'm sort of feeling like, you know, if you made that in one, that might be the thing that I might want to buy. I have to say, and again, I don't want to, you know, there's lots of great products on the market, and you know, you can achieve some lunatic sounds now with the smallest of budgets. But your amp in a box pedals are they are the ones the best thing I can probably say is that in those demos I do forget that I'm playing through a little pair of speakers.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If I focus on it, you obviously go, well, I am, but it is very easy to actually just forget that and just concentrate on playing guitar, and which is all you want, really.
That's awesome. Thanks.
So is that what you're going to design me now? Is it? Okay. Who do I give the order to?
Yeah, I want to rush off and get a soldering iron and go build that.
Look, Bill, it's been a pleasure to meet you. Have you
likewise.
I know your dad will be immensely proud of what you've continued doing. I'm sure you know that as well. I'm sure other people have told you that, but I'm sure he will be. And long may it continue. And maybe there'll be another generation of Putnams, I don't know, that are going to just, you know, be doing the AI thing in another 50 years' time and making musicians' life easier. That's it, isn't it? Just make my life easier so that I can just make music.
Get to the creek, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, look.
Hey, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Links below if you want to go and check out some of Bill's amazing products, or indeed go and watch a video on one of the ones we've done before. But thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll see you another time. Bye-bye.